Welcome to Do Wonders, the podcast that highlights the incredible work and stories of the Centria Autism team. I'm Timothy Yeager.
And I'm Lisa Cunningham. In each episode, we take you behind the scenes to meet the dedicated professionals who make a difference in the lives of our clients and their families.
Through these conversations, you'll get to know the personal journeys, the challenges, and the successes that truly define our team.
Whether you're part of the Centria family or just curious about the amazing work happening here, we're glad you're with us.
So join us in diving into the wonders of Centria Autism.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have the pleasure of having Kelly DaCosta with us. Kelly DaCosta is actually our Vice President of Operations for our West region. So Kelly, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
So really, first question, we know you today as our VP of Operations for West Region, but I think you've worn a lot of hats here, and I think there's a journey to be shared. And we'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got in the field, what you did before you got to Centria, and if you could also share some of the various roles and things that you've done that has led to where you're at today.
And we'll buckle up. It's going to be a long ride right now.
It's about a 12-year ride that you guys are about to go on. So my background, I received my graduate degree in school psychology from Teachers College at Columbia. I think I may have overlapped part of my time there with Timothy at some point, but we did not know each other.
Yeah, same floor, same building.
Yeah. So I started there, and then when I graduated, I stayed in New York City, but decided to get a concentration in ABA. So I worked with Dr. Carbone, who is pretty well known in the world of ABA for his skill set in verbal behavior. What led me from school psychology to ABA, and this is the long journey we're going on, right? I come from a background of a family dedicated to computer science and data and analysis. In college, I was like, whoa, can't do that. I need to do something more like human oriented, like helping the world, right? And ABA is kind of the perfect mix of that. It's all data driven, it's scientific based, but it's helping, the world. So I found ABA throughout my graduate school degree and worked with Dr. Carbone. Went into school districts for a long time in New York. I helped set up in a public school district their special education classroom. I had 12 classrooms, all implementing ABA. 5 out of the 12 teachers, I trained them up and got them to be BCBAs, which was great and so exciting. We started implementing the VB map in the school district, things that were just kind of like unheard of at the time, which was amazing. But then I got married, had kids, and was like, nah, can't live in New York forever, right? So I moved to Oregon, which is where I'm from. And at that point, Centria kind of scouted me out. They were a very small company in Michigan at the time. Hadn't really expanded yet. This is in 2015. So I was the first hired in Oregon, and funny story, the week they flew me out for orientation, I had found out I was pregnant the day before. So that was sort of the ride that I started on. First hired in Oregon as a supervising clinician, helped set up assessments, worked with credentialing, trying to just get everything up and going out here. There were no operators. It was just me. And over time, I worked my way through pretty much every role in Centria. So I started supervising clinician at the time. Then I quickly moved to a regional clinical director, very, very much so aligned with the operations role throughout all of this, because again, it was, there was only a small handful of us in Oregon. So became very close on that side. And then I kind of served this dual function for a long time of like clinical leader, operations leader. We had executive clinical directors at the time, which there wasn't a clear role, right? Like I was kind of just running the West region, how I saw fit, what was maybe appropriate, maybe not, I don't know. We didn't have a lot of rules at that time. And then right around when COVID hit, I think, Timothy, you came in and really started developing our clinical model and our clinical excellence team, and really started defining who's an operator, who's a clinician, and these roles. And so I had a decision path to go on of, do I go clinical? Do I go operations? I decided to go to the dark side. I went to operations.
I
I
always
still
hear the
very
imperial march when someone talks about operations.
I I really I love both sides, but the team that Timothy was developing, like my clinical skill set is not at that caliber. Like the team that he developed is like just so wonderful and well known in the field and have, research behind them and all these things. I'm a strong clinician, but I'm not that. I am very much so a strong operational leader. And with my clinical background, I thought that that was really appropriate. I could really marry the two and make good decisions for our clients, but while running the business, which I thought was really important. So it just went down that path throughout the journey as an operator. I've overseen PNW, California. I think we had Minnesota in there at one point, Arizona, New Mexico. Worked across pretty much every department and collaborated with everyone. And here I am now. So right now I am overseeing the West, which is PNW, California, New Mexico, Arizona.
When I think about this incredible journey you've been on, I imagine Centria has evolved over the years, and you hinted about some of those points, and I've really been sitting with this book that Simon Sinek wrote called The Infinite Game. And many people know about Simon Sinek from his like Find Your Why and his TED Talk on what your why is. But he also wrote a book called The Infinite Game, and we don't really think about infinite games a lot. Our culture is really around like finite games, like winners, losers, beginnings, and ends. And an infinite game, and how you win an infinite game is like you stay in the game, and it's around like continual progress over time. I think at times our culture today, and maybe even our industry, like set like finite parameters on like what good is. We need to get to here. Like if it's not good, if it's not this, I'm gonna like go find it elsewhere. And what's in like I think the conversation I want to have with you is like I'm sure that there are and have been times at Centria to where like you weren't happy with something, you weren't happy with a decision or a change or a role change possibly or responsibility change, and yet the ability to stay in the game has led to like continuing having progress and impact.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of interviews right now for operational positions. And one of the questions a lot of people ask me is like, what do you like best about Centria? Why have you stayed with Centria? And my response to that has been, I've been here for a long time. I'm a dinosaur with Centria, right? Like I've seen every wave and I've seen the company evolve over time. And every step that it's gone through has become better and better and better. And the things that are better are what's important to me. So like the amount of time, energy, focus, money, resources, all the things that we're doing is for clinical quality, and every step that we take is going in the right direction. We've made some really significant changes in the past couple years with bringing in like Hillary Laney's team, Foundation of Care. Like I can now at this point with Centria say, we have a quality standard and we're implementing it, right? We're ensuring that people are sticking to it. We have a way of measuring it. We have a way of training people to it. We have like all those things are in place now. And do they keep getting better over time? Are they perfect? Probably not, but we keep moving in that direction. When we first started, and I was telling you my journey, I said, in the West, maybe we're doing some things right. Maybe I wasn't. I don't know, right? Like we didn't have that when I first started. And the fact that we do now and we have a whole team dedicated solely to that makes me want to continue on this ride, right? The field of ABA is so new. There's so many companies doing things in ways that maybe aren't with the best, the best approach or for the clients and I really truly believe like as an organization, as big as we are doing it the right way.
So how do you sit in those moments though when like maybe like you were told you're taking over a market you didn't want to take over, or maybe you were told you're not taking over a market that you didn't want to take over. Maybe it's like you're from Oregon, but now you're going to New Mexico and you're gonna have nothing to do with Oregon for a period of time, right? Like like, how do you sit in those, what some may perceive as like setbacks or challenges, and like think through like pushing through that to like continue to move forward?
Yeah, that's when I first started, again, I was like the first one in Oregon. Oregon was my baby. I grew it for many years. I was very dedicated to it. I had, all my eggs in that basket, like just everything. And during COVID, at one point, when right after COVID, we had additional leadership, we had some other movement coming in, and it was sort of like, hey, you're going to only have New Mexico. And I was like, whoa, that's a big change. New Mexico also, I don't know if anyone's been to Albuquerque, but it's like New Mexico
It's a
has
little
a
different than Portland.
it's very different than Portland. Yeah, yeah, things like that were, they can be perceived as setbacks, but for me, I was like, all right, this is a new challenge. Like, it broadens my portfolio, right? I have a new team to work with, develop, manage. That's learning for me. I have new payers that I'm dealing with, working with, trying to navigate. Again, like learning for me. So I view every change as just like a way to develop my own skill set and portfolio. Not necessarily setbacks, just something different to focus on. I also cannot stand just doing the same thing every day in and out. Like, I need the challenges. I need something new to focus on. I need the side project. Another thing that's always kept me kind of going with Centria is I've been given the opportunity to partner with different resource centers to help develop new initiatives to, like, I always have some sort of side project going. So it keeps me just invested and interested in what we're doing and what we're creating.
My coach, Shannon Gold, she talks to me a lot about just finding the gift in everything. And sometimes there is a gift in everything, and sometimes it's harder to find. And that perspective that you're talking about is like the right one, which is there's always something to learn. There's always something to be better by, whether it's a good thing or, learn what not to do. There's always something there. I can really appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I also just like the opportunity of the different challenges. That also shows me that my leadership trusts me too, right? Like, they're supportive and they're trusting. And throughout Centria, I've had a lot of different leaders, but I've always been very much so supported in the work that I'm doing, which has been great.
Yeah. Just hearing you talk, Kelly, it kind of brings us back to, I think, things that we've talked about on this podcast, but also just discussions we probably all had, where like mindset is so crucial, not only in leadership, it can be individual performance, but truly you can be your own limiting factor if you believe something's not achievable or possible. And I think about that too in the context of understanding what your values are. And hearing you talk about that, like, I was bought into all the changes because we were moving in the direction of things that were important to me. And so, kind of talking about that intersection of mindset and values, I see you as somebody, like, some things that I can see that you haven't shared as necessarily your value is that you get after something. Like, you see the challenge, which you have talked about, but I think also another value of yours is that you see growth as being something that's like possible, something that is anything can be achievable. And so a challenge is an opportunity for your own development. Quality seems like a value of yours, not only in the clinical side of things, but I can see that in everything you touch and everything you do, like, in some ways. And you've grown a ton. And since we worked
Every
together,
Instagram post you make.
I haven't seen Instagram posts, but like, perfection, I think, was maybe the game earlier on. And like, you would just stay after a problem until it was solved. Like, you want it to be good. So like, I certainly think quality is a value of yours, but what are some other values that you think have served you in this environment, in addition to your mindset, that has brought this like longevity and really like an up and to the right path?
Yeah. The things you're highlighting, I think, are just like ingrained in me. For those that, have spoken to me, know me, my mom's Chinese. She is like the epitome of a tiger mom. You are not allowed to not do well. Like, you had to put the work in, you had to dedicate time, energy, and you had to perform. And so that's something I expect of myself, but I expect it of my team members as well. So yeah, like, hard work. When we talk about values, hardworking, I'm extremely competitive. I want to do the right thing the right way. And something, that I've grown with Centria is like, we used to say like, we want to be perfect, right? Like we're not like perfect can be inhibiting, right? So like when we talk about now, my mindset is like, we need to just keep doing like growing, doing better, more and more, right? Like doing the best we can every time, not doing it perfect every time. And that's something that in my journey with Centria, I've had to come to terms with. I want everything to be perfect, but it's just not possible. And then other values for me is just like the human interaction, right? Like I care about the people I work with. I want them to succeed as well too. Do I expect a lot of them? Absolutely. But I will guide them to it. I will create a relationship with them. I'll coach them, I'll mentor, whatever it is. Like I want the best for the people I work with. And then that also goes to the clients too. Like the most important reason why we're all here. Like we want the clients to succeed as well and have clinical outcomes and make gains. And those are lifelong changes for these clients, for the families. And that I think, again, like why I've stuck with Centria is because I keep seeing the progression toward that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that because I know that, I know some of the leaders you've worked with. I know the culture that we've had. And I completely agree with you. I think that why I've been here for 7 years is that we do continue, like every evolution has been a positive one. But there were challenges along the way. And I think
Yeah.
you obviously had, I think there's like a quality in there. And I don't know if it's just like mental fortitude or if it's just like you had the optimism to stay after it. But I don't know, what advice would you give to folks who maybe are at a point in their career that it might be one of those challenging times where they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel? Because I know there were those moments for you, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those noon calls during the pandemic.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Our stand-ups, yeah. And I think back to that. People always refer back to that. And, for me, those calls were, they were daunting. They're stressful. They were, there was there was a lot. But for me, and I think why I've been able to kind of stick through a lot of that is I'm really confident in my skill set and the work, and I come prepared, right? Like I will never walk into a meeting without knowing my market, being prepared, knowing what's going. Like I work really hard so that in those meetings, there's never something that's going to come up that I don't know about, right? Like I have my hands in there. So I guess when I say like the confident, like, or the advice, it's like being confident in the work you're doing and knowing that you're putting your effort in, right? Like knowing that you're doing things the right way and coming prepared. Just do what you're supposed to do and you'll be fine, like, and that I think is just, if you do that every day, you will be just fine. And then in terms of the light at the end of the tunnel, I think it really is developing the relationship with your direct leaders and Centria as a whole, and trusting that we're making the right choices. We really are investing in the right things with the right people. And it's not going to change tomorrow, right? Like things don't just happen tomorrow. It takes time.
That perspective. Like I think there's like grit in there, but with no doubt, like I think that describes you to a T. Like you are after it, like you have a lot of grit. I think you have a lot of resilience. But I think that you take a lot of control of your outcome. You don't let like the day run you or the circumstance run you. I would argue to say that like I think you're somebody who takes the situation and you don't see yourself as victim to it. You see that you play an active role in it. And I think that to what you just said, like your preparedness, it's like, sure, this is happening. It could be uncomfortable. But I really appreciate your perspective on that, because I think you do a lot to kind of control the outcome by not letting it control you.
Yeah. I mean, I view everything as sort of like a puzzle. We're going to solve it, right? Like we're going to work through it. It's not a barrier. Like we'll accomplish it. We'll overcome it. We'll use our resources. We'll partner with whatever team it is that we need to partner with it, and we'll overcome it, right? There's like a constant movement forward. And there has to be.
For sure.
Just, it's just what it is.
So thinking about that, and I think about your journey, I'm gonna be a little candid right now with you, Kelly. So forgive me if I overstep as I do sometimes.
Go for it.
When I think about like your journey at Centria, and I think about like just like my perspective at times, like this idea that you were out in Oregon by yourself and trying to like fend for yourself and figure it out, I think led to like a lone wolf leader, right? Like where like you had to figure out your own, and you did a great job doing so. Like you stand up systems, you stood up ways, right? I can remember like some of the first times we were trying to like standardize and structure like across the entire organization. There was like the Michigan way to do things. There was the Oregon way to do things, right?
Yep.
And so that, and like what you spoke about, like always coming to a meeting prepared, which typically meant to me that Kelly's always going to have an opinion about something, and it's going to be informed by like data and knowledge. How has like the dyad model changed these things, right? Like, because now it's not just you speaking on behalf of your like region; it's you and a peer, which is somewhat, I think, different than like how you've like grew up in these roles.
Yeah, no, I so back before the dyad model, it was just me trying to manage clinical, trying to manage operations. When I say trying to manage clinical, I was looking at the metrics and the metrics only. Like there were no overlaps, there were no quality assurance. Like it was literally just just looking at straight data on a paper, right? And then being like the person where the clinician would come to if they didn't know a process or like a policy or something. But there was no actual clinical support happening. They're just capacity wise, there was no opportunity, right? When we first started the dyad model, my partner was on leave. And so I had around 2 to 3 months where it was really just me with all of the West. And that was a lot. It was very busy. It was fun, but it was a lot. So when Kaja came back,
I drop in every now and then.
Yeah, Timothy would drop in every now and then. We'd, like SOS, Timothy, like I need something, right? But I mean, you don't have the capacity. Like Kaja and I speak every day, like multiple times a day, but every day it's on the, like, you didn't have the capacity for that. I didn't have the capacity for that. But yeah, no, Kaja, it has been a breath of fresh air having a dyad partner, because I know that was like a hole in my area that was so like, it was so needed, and the clinicians were craving that attention, that support, so needed for the clients. And Kaja's a beast too. Like she is very simple. Like you give her a goal, you give her a task, she's going to figure out, she's going to accomplish it. We're very much so similar in that manner. She is action oriented. I think our end goals are very similar as well. Whether that's me on the business side of things or her on the clinical side, it's all coming back to like supporting our team and the quality of services that we're providing. Because at the end of the day, that also aligns with our business model, right? Like we're trying to bill for therapy. Well, you can only, right? Like if you bill for therapy, that means you're providing services to our clients, and dosage is very important in our services and clinical quality, right? So like everything goes hand in hand. And Kaja and I are able to be very real with one another. We speak every day. I trust her. We have a great relationship. Now, do we have conflict every once in a while? Absolutely. Healthy conflict. We talk through it, we work through it, and then we make a decision point and we keep going with it. But that shift with the dyad model has ultimately, in my current stage of Centria, kept me going. Like having someone to work with, bounce ideas off of, speak to daily, tag team things. It's just been so beneficial. And I know on the clinical side, she's valued and appreciated. Like it's just been a really, really great shift in the model over the past year.
So that perspective is one that I think we have to figure out how to like get shared across the organization, in the sense that like, I think as a junior leader myself at times, and I think that there are junior leaders now that are in our organization, which is just like, if everyone just did it my way, the center would be run better, right? Like if I was the one in charge, my center would be run better. If the operations director just reported into me as a DCS, the center would run better, right? Whereas like, the truth is that's not true, right? That is just an escape of like the challenge of working with a peer to get to that beneficial relationship. And I hope we can talk a little bit more about that, which is like, how do you work through conflict? How do you, like, you have a strong opinion, Kaja has a strong opinion. Like, how do you guys work together through that to get to even a better opinion and a better outcome?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of that, I think, is just communication, right? Like, we pick up the phone, we call each other, we talk. We have a standing meeting every day at 3 p.m. We meet. it's on our calendars for half an hour. Sometimes it's 15 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour and a half, right? Just depends on what's going on, but we have it on our calendar and we have that dialogue. And I think the great thing about Kaja and myself is we're not afraid to state our opinions, right? Like we will, both of us are very vocal in our opinions. Luckily, more often than not, our opinions are aligned. At times when it isn't, though, we reason through it, we discuss it, and we come to an agreement. I don't think either one of us are so set in our own opinion and my way that we're stubborn with it necessarily either, right? Like we're listening to each other and we trust each other. And if it doesn't
So
work out,
values aligned, outcomes aligned, right?
right. Yeah. And like at least there's a decision point at the end of the day, and we implement and we try, and then maybe we come back and shift. We've met over the past several weeks, months on what's the right meeting cadence, right? Like for our teams, like what should that look like? What do we want them to report out on? What kind of goals do they have? We've shifted that 3 times in the past like 4 months because we're just not quite there. Like we discuss, we say, what do we want this to look like? We implement it, not quite getting us the outcomes we want. We change, we shift, and so it's this ever going process of, let's just try it. Let's just go with it.
Lisa, giving up control is hard for a new leader, right? Like going into a meeting with like, I don't know what the right outcome is, and we're going to work together to figure it out. It's an uncomfortable spot to be in as a leader.
Yeah. The uncomfortable is good sometimes.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, and I think, Timothy, I'm not answering your question because I don't work in the dyad partnership. Hopefully from an HR perspective, there's partnership. But hearing you talk, Kelly, there are some themes I heard. There's got to be trust, mutual respect, curiosity, flexibility, collaboration. And to your point, Timothy, an alignment of values. I think that's key here. I feel like that's good to think about because that's the basis of effective relationships, probably across the board.
Picking up the phone, I can't tell you how many times problems become bigger in the absence of communication, and it's just in your head, right?
Yeah.
You just make the monster bigger, and when you call someone and talk about it, it's not the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah, agreed. The written communication is, it can be perceived in whatever way you want it to be, and every once in a while we're CC'd on these email threads that's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. 1, it's a waste of everyone's time, right? But 2, everyone's reading it slightly different, understanding it slightly different. The story gets changed. That same email thread that lasted 4 days could have probably been a 5-minute conversation.
Kelly and I have had those 5-minute conversations after a round of emails before.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And Timothy, being very candid with you, there's some emails where I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
and then we get on the phone and it's okay, I get what you're saying. Got it. Let's move on.
Yep.
Yeah, we construct an interesting narrative, don't we?
Yeah.
I think wrapping up, Kelly, here, we kind of think about this and you shared so much of yourself in this podcast and really just a lot about your journey, both to here and since here. We obviously know you as Kelly, our VP of operations for the West region, but you play a really significant role in other relationships of your life outside of work. And I think, it's a conversation we're having here on we really need, especially for our executive leaders, to not just be seen as this one facet of their life. We are humans and we play this role, job title at Centria, but your mom, right? To Olive and Leo and, you're a partner, a wife. How do you bring your whole self so that work doesn't get the best of you?
Oh, that's a good question. It's really hard being a woman and leader who's in leadership, who's a parent with my children are, they're not independent. They're 3 and 7. They're still young. Luckily I have a really supportive, wonderful, hands-on husband who my kids probably like better than me anyway. But, those are all things that, I've been able to navigate within my own personal relationships, right? But it doesn't change the fact that I have severe mom guilt, right? Like when I travel every other week, if not more sometimes, I landed last night at 1 a.m. Like I'm on the road fairly often visiting my markets. And that's something that's really important to me. I very much so value my time with my team. I think it's important to be there with them hands on a holiday week. Like those are things that I think show my dedication, show my commitment to my team. And those are things that are really important to me. Yet I have, every time I'm away, I'm thinking of my kids and I'm juggling all the things. I make sure that I prep all the meals before I go. Like I'm the one carrying kind of the weight of all of that. Even though my husband's physically there, I'm still mentally there pretty much at all time. It is extremely hard to separate the two. But I am someone who is very passionate in being successful in my career. And it's something that I dedicate my time and energy to because I want to. I'm not just a mom, right? I'm also a professional and I'm going to be, continue to grow in my career. And that's just something like a life choice that I've made that was probably ingrained in me from that tiger mom from when I was very little. And my family's very understanding of it. So I have that support network as well. But it doesn't change the emotional weight that I carry pretty much daily.
It does seem though, Kelly, that like you have an ability to like turn work off, and maybe that's just I think you do have ability to like, from what I've perceived, to be able to like make the most of moments and
Yeah.
like create moments with your family.
Yeah, absolutely. On a day to day, I have my phone on me at all times. I am on email and Power BI. I mean, before we started the podcast, I was telling Lisa when I wake up at 2 a.m., I don't go to like Instagram and TikTok. I go to Power BI, which doesn't, like those are, so when I'm here day to day, that's what happens. However, my weekends, I don't open my computer unless I have to, except for my Sunday report. So that's not true, actually. I do a Sunday report every week. But on the times when I am with my family, dedicated time, I really do try to unplug. A week or two ago, we went to Central Oregon and there was no service. We were there for 3 days and we were at a cabin on a lake and it was beautiful one-to-one time with my kids without a device. And, my kids ask, we do like a nightly routine, like what was the best part of the day or, before bedtime. And on that night, when we got back, I was like, I love not having service. Like that was the best thing for me. And my daughter was like, why? And I was like, I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't distracted. And she was like, we got to go there more. We're going to go back. Right. So I think those are like, when I make the most of my time, it's really those like short, quick weekend trips or like the dedicated focused time with family.
Yeah. I hear you on that. And with a lot of like kind of similar things, like I have absolutely made it where like my career and this part of my identity is something really important to me. And I also have a great partner, Nick, who, he's very hands-on. But I also like, when I have those moments of feeling like, am I giving enough to my family? What I have appreciated is that David forces all of our ELT. We have professional goals every quarter that we need to move the business forward. And he forces us also to make personal goals, which are often like spending meaningful time with family, like making sure that I have the ability to, like, again, I think he sees it like really holistically. Like I am Lisa at work, but I need to also make sure that I'm giving time to be present in the moments. And I think that's really like the key to some of this is, those small moments are what matter when you can give undivided attention to your kid. Like I got to go painting with my son last weekend and like, it was an hour and 15 minutes, maybe. We got ice cream afterwards. So of course, it was fun things that he liked, but it was just him and I, nothing else. And I think in some ways, we're probably arguably able to be successful in our roles because you give the undivided attention. And I think it is really just choosing what's important to you, almost going back to the very beginning of this discussion where you talk about those values and it's like making time for it. And you can't be everywhere at once, clearly. You can't be everything one, but I think it's being intentional and aligning your actions to your values that, is probably why you have the great relationships you do, both inside of work and outside work.
And Lisa should become an acceptance and commitment therapist. That is like exactly.
I know. It's great. The key word that I heard is like intentional, right? Like just intentional with your time. Like time is finite, right? Like you have to make meaning with every second. And that intentional part is so important, whether at work, in your personal life, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like I at times I struggle with guilt as a parent and thinking, and I had this like this big plan. It was last year. I was gonna rent a house on the beach in Oceanside before my Roslyn had a tournament, soccer tournament down there, and it was gonna be this big week with like the boys and her, my parents, and it was a disaster. Like the Airbnb was like way too nice for my kids. Like there was like steep stairs, the photos of the beach. There's only a beach there in the wintertime. Like in the summer, the tide's too high. And so it's like I had like all these things in my head that I thought like this big moment of being a dad. And Tiffany, my wife at the time, she's still my wife. At the time she told me this, that that like being a parent isn't about these big things. It's about like making the most of the moments that you have. And
Yeah.
like being a good parent is like that bedtime routine. Like how do you show up, right? Like when you come from home from work, how do you show up? And it's making the most of those little moments that add up to a life that your children are going to be impacted by and remember.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, Kelly, it's been really great to talk to you. I value your leadership, and I value the ability that the model that you've had and the model you showed as a leader in this organization, the impact that you've had and continue to have. And it was just great to get to talk to you a little bit more.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So our conversation with Kelly, she talked a lot about, and we talked about like her course of time at Centria, like progress that Centria's had over time, and a perspective that she had, which was we're going to get better. We trust the decisions that are being made, and she sees that we're getting better over time. And there's a behavioral principle I want to talk about, which is a shaping. And I have what most behavior analysts know is the Cooper, Heron, and Heward book. This is second edition. There's a third edition out now. But for those that don't know, this is like the really main text of like your first or second semester of ABA. And it has a general overview of all of the areas of ABA. I have it because I'm just going to read the definition of shaping. Shaping is using differential reinforcement to produce a series of gradually changing response classes. Each response class is a successive approximation toward a terminal behavior. And so let's talk about what those are. There's a lot of terms that you probably need defining too. One, response class. Response class is a group of behaviors that may look different from like what we call topography. They may look different, but they have the same functional impact on the environment, right? And so, like if I am being like, this is just a silly example. I'm looking at a door right now. So if I was like being taught to like go to the door and open it, I could walk there, I could run there, I could hop there, I could crawl there. Those all look different, but if I was accessing reinforcement to like get to the door, all of those different behaviors would fall into the same response class, and they would fall into the same like reinforcement contingencies. So it's not necessarily how something looks, it's how something behaves on the environment that gets like shaped. So that's response class. The other one was differential reinforcement. And differential reinforcement, as like a lay perspective, which would be that like you reinforce things that get closer to a goal, and maybe the things that used to be reinforced previously that are further away from the goal are no longer reinforced, right? So like we were talking about fitness earlier, and like maybe I would set a goal that I wanted to reinforce working out twice a week, right? And for a period of time, I would access reinforcement for working out twice a week. Working out could vary from topography, so that could be like lifting weights, it could be running, it could be swimming. Topographically, those are all different, but functionally they're the same, like working out, exerting effort, burning calories. But at some point when I'm doing really good at 2 times a week, I may then set my goal for 3 times a week. And I would not access reinforcement for doing 2 times a week anymore. So that wouldn't be my goal, but 3 times a week, all towards like terminal goal of like getting to 4 or 5 times a week. Right. And so when you think about like, just to stay with health and fitness, when you think about achieving a goal, how many times have we like had a New Year's resolution, which is like, all right, I'm gonna go on a diet and I'm gonna work out 5 times a week, right? Instead of taking a shaping perspective of getting there, we just try to do an all or nothing, achieve the goal or don't achieve the goal. Yeah, I'm gonna go to bed on the 31st and wake up the 1st. I'm a brand new person. I'm not gonna overeat and I'm gonna be like healthy every day. And that's just like not a good perspective on life. And it's definitely not a good perspective on like shaping behavior and like achieving a goal. Why we want to talk about this. And I think about like there are so many things that like when you work for a company that you want it to be different. You want to change. You wish like this thing happened in this way. Or this system isn't working well. Sometimes people have the perspective of um, I'll find another company. Like this company's not there yet. They're not working out 5 days a week and eating healthy. I'm going to go to a different company, right? Um, I think leaders and people that can align with our values and vision can take a different perspective, which is a perspective of like incremental progress, reinforcing that progress and like growth. I think Kelly modeled to a great degree, and it's one area that I have to continue to like work my perspective on. And you and I've had many moments where I've been like frustrated and upset about like us not being at a certain destination or goal yet. But it's a very healthy perspective to think about like, well, what's the 10% progress we can make now? Like, what's the next step that we can make now? And you eventually make a lot more progress when you think about it in the long run, because if you're not going anywhere, you're going to be here for a while, right? And there's a lot of progress to be made if you make little chunks of progress over time.
It also seems way more doable, just practically speaking, right? Like for me to say, I'm just gonna like start tomorrow by working out 5 days a week and doing that. Like I just personally feel like I would probably set myself up for failure because I might have the ambition, but the action aligning the ambition with the action. Like if I miss it one day, now I failed because I set the goal so high, right? As opposed to like adequately layering in goals when progress is achieved. Or not goals,
100%.
stones. I may not be saying the right words, but
For
I'm just
sure.
it can be so disheartening.
And you think about like we've talked about positive reinforcement before in this podcast, but like um you're robbing yourself of access to reinforcement if you're setting a goal that you can't achieve quickly and frequently, right? And so by giving you approximations, um, like the decreasing like the either response effort, the difficulty, whatever it may be, to achieve that goal, you're increasing access to reinforcement, which will maintain your pursuit of that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because like reflecting on this and like seeing it play in the professional environment, right? It's like, I am a big advocate of therapy and seeing counselors and just being able to kind of like talk through your thoughts with a professional because big stuff happens in all of our lives.
Mhm.
I think back to, when I first started at Centria, we were in our old building even, which gives me like some level of, I know it was pre-COVID, right? I know it was like 2018. But yeah, I remember trying to like set a goal with my therapist at the time. And she was like, yeah, do you think you maybe want to start a little smaller? And it's like, so it is kind of human behavior to have that level of
For
ambition,
sure.
like misalignment. But, I think about that, and we just talked about it earlier in the podcast, even as David kind of forced me to like, it can become really natural for me to set ambitious work goals. And I do think that that is something that I have to take the milestones and the steps and the progress. And I love to be able to say, if this is the goal, how do I reverse engineer success? I do think sometimes it's trickier personally, though. And
Mhm.
it's almost harder for me to set some of those personal goals because I know where I want to be, but I don't necessarily know, especially with my kids, because it's like, sure, I've been a mom for 8 years, but I'm learning to be a mom to an 8-year-old. I'm learning to be, a mom of 2 kids in some ways. And so it's like I really struggled with that concept, even though it's like I know it and I'm probably like coaching people through that from a
Yeah.
leadership perspective. Just like,
You
yeah,
don't
like
spend enough time, I think, either thinking about, being trained, or educating yourself on like the components of what you're trying to achieve personally, right? Like, and so I think, and this is what I think about like professionally. Um, like we spend a lot of time thinking about, and I think to some degree it's probably even more concrete and easier to operationalize like the work that we do professionally. Personally, it's a lot harder to operationalize those things, and I think that is a really good sentiment of like where your time should be spent and like those quiet moments, or like how do I like take these nebulous feelings or just like abstract thoughts around or subjective thoughts around my personal accomplishments or like how I show up as a dad, and like concretely put like definitions to the things that I want to do better, and be able to like measure that and see that in order to backwards map towards it.
Yeah, I totally see that. And it just made me think of something else really interesting where it is like I do feel like it's easier in work for a number of things. And largely I think like roles are very clearly defined and like what success looks
Yep,
like.
yep.
But that, to your point, that gets a lot like fuzzier or is more nebulous and like sure, like you have a role as like dad, but like dad to 1, 2, 3, 4, like that
Yeah.
role is constantly evolving and there's not really it's not like you get a job description for dad.
And being a dad's not a finite game, right?
Yeah.
Part of my job as a dad is like to continue to have the opportunity to be a dad to my kids for as long in their life as possible, right? And like there's finite components and there's milestones, but there's a lot more long picture, like I think about my role as dad to Roslyn. She's 14 now, but like I think about like when like 30 years from now, like what is the role of dad that I want to have? And like how do we stay in the game in order to have that role? Um, but I'll say I'm gonna push back a little bit on you because one of your personal goals I think is concrete in that you had talked about being home, so many nights a week to cook dinner for your family, and that's an objective, concrete thing that um, seems aligned.
Well, don't worry, David got me there. It's just was a process.
Yeah,
He was like, "Yeah, I think my goal is to like be more present with my family." And he was like, "That's a good aspiration, Lisa, but what are you gonna do? Like, what's your goal? Like, what's important? What does showing up look like? You know?" And so we did end up like breaking that down. And in some ways, it felt really like weird to me to be like, "Oh, I'm like talking about making sure that I like, like," and we kind of talked about this, like I'm not gonna this is a goal I've made with my husband is like, I don't want to miss bedtime more than one night a week.
yeah,
Unless it's like if there's a work event or something like that, but it's not just because I'm getting through a work day. I'm not
right,
gonna do that. But I think David pushed me too to say, like, I want you to figure out your schedule in a way that you can like it sounds like family dinner is something you're not really doing, but it's a value of yours. So like and I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I could do that, whatever. He's like, let me start with 2 days a week. Like
yeah,
trying to help me with like, yeah, you're probably not gonna be able to like be home, cook a meal, do all the meal play, like all of that stuff. It takes a lot, right? And so
yeah,
start small and like incorporate. I guess when I think about personal versus professional, like I got a support system. I have a team, we have technology, we have process, we have all these things, but like you got to kind of treat the variables and people, like the relationships in your life where it's like I had to bring Nick along in that too to say, hey, I want to make sure that like we have family dinner and we make a plan for what we want to do,
yeah. I think that also resonates with what Kelly said around, and we've talked about this, which is to be an effective present parent as an executive means that you have, to some degree, a partner that allows and supports, and you can like coordinate and like give and take, and to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's yeah, you got to align the people
Yeah,
and the resources. And I think, I appreciate this conversation and it's going to be something I reflect on this weekend a lot on. If I'm finding more success in my professional life, I could argue like, oh, I've just done it longer. I'm good at it. But it's just, it all just takes, I fully believe what Kelly shared. Like anything is possible. Like
yeah,
and I don't think that I am a like delusional optimist in that. I just think that things can be figured out if you get the right people in the room or have the right resource. That's a belief that I have. And
agreed.
so think like carrying it in, like when I have those moments of like mom guilt or I'm not feeling the success in my own life, it's kind of like, how do I think about like shaping where it's like start small? Like you can get there. It's the same solvable problem as anything in work. So yeah, I guess I do want to start thinking more about how do it's just like a success path, right?
Yeah.
Is like figure out the small steps, because those are the behaviors that set probably habit.
Mm-hmm.
When it's a habit, you have to put less thought and energy into it. When you're building it, it takes a lot of time and thought and planning. And once it's just a habit, when you've made those steps, that's where, again, just like that's the foundation for growth, right?
Yeah. In behavior analysis, we would say when a behavior gets reinforced over time, it becomes fluent. And with that, when fluency, the same word as your word habit, like you're just setting up the probability of like the next thing happening from there and learning the next thing and adapting to get to the next thing. When I think about shaping, there's two perspectives that I want like listeners and like our employees to take away from, which is one, as an employee, I think it's really important to take this nebulous concept of I want our center to be better, or I want our company to be better, or I want like this, my job to be better. And then define what better is. Like, what are the things that you want to do and achieve in your job? You and I have talked about this before, which is like for the most part, most people have a greater sense of control over their job and what they do and don't do than they like sometimes give themselves credit for or the job credit for. You can arrange your job to a much greater degree to ensure that you're doing the things that you want to do while doing the things that you have to do. And I would challenge people to, if they're not happy, if they're not satisfied, there's things they want to change, like define what those are. And then define the steps that you want to see to happen in order to achieve those things. And that is the hard thing, right? So like when I talk about like the company and the progress that we're making, it's like getting concrete to like, we're not satisfied where we're at now. And yes, we've made progress, right? So like maybe we're working out 3 days a week now instead of 2 days a week, but we still want to get to 5 days a week. I still would rather my pants fit a little bit better as well. So like there's more to be done, right? But like define what those things are and measure them. And it can get very easy to take a victim mindset or an apathetic mindset when you talk about things with broad brushstrokes and in the abstract and not in like concrete things that you can do. And once you get to concrete things that you can do, you can measure it, you can set goals, you can take approximations, and that's reinforcement to get there.
Yeah, it's so much more empowering.
100%.
Thinking about that, right? It's like taking your example. I want to be healthy. Well, what does healthy mean to you? What does good at your center look like? What does good for, your team look like? You can't just stop with that. You have to sit with it and actually think through like, how would I define good? Okay, so healthy for me, that's going to be exercising, and it's going to be eating right, and it's going to be getting the right amount of sleep. Like, and I think that that's kind of a crucial piece of closing the gap between aspiration and action is
For
like
sure.
finding it and starting in like a digestible amount.
Yeah. And feeling empowered to do so. Cause I think that's the one message I heard from Kelly was like, some people could have seen things that like she's had to go through or changes that she had to go through. Like her and I didn't talk about it, I know, but the move from Oregon to oversee New Mexico and giving up Oregon was not an easy thing to do, right? But like having that perspective and ownership and empowerment, like, here's the next opportunity, and her goal to be a better leader, to advance her skill set, right? Like take on this new challenge. Taking that shaping perspective and that mindset of approximate like progress and like just continual progress is just healthy for us all.
Mm-hmm. No doubt on that one.
All
What was
right.
the second piece you wanted team members to take away? Was that it?
Was that us as an organization are doing the exact same thing. And so there's certain things that are in their control, and there's certain things that like as an executive team that we aren't satisfied with where we're at. We're going to continue to make progress, continue to grow, and continue to improve, and continue to like down this evolution that we've been on. We're not stopping.
No, I hear you on that. I think the only thing I would like to add is that I do think we have a vision. Hopefully we're breaking it down from like ambition to like where you can act. But I think one of the things I've always appreciated about Centria, and I know because it's aligned with my value set, so this could be challenging for some people, is that not everything's going to be a set of like decision trees. Like there's going to be an opportunity for you to exercise agency or autonomy in how you make it happen, right? And so yeah, there are processes, there are ways we want to do things, but like when we're talking about dealing with people, your approach will inherently be different than my approach. And so our successes can both be like there is so much still within your control. And so I just do appreciate that not everything is prescribed, like that we don't have a handbook that's 150 pages and 1,000 policies. Like we got a lot of documentation and I love that, but I think it's meant to be more guiding than like overly prescriptive.
Yeah, our leaders aren't lemmings, right? Our leaders can lead, and it would be way too presumptuous of us at times to be able to prescribe everything a leader does and how they do it. And part of the work that we're doing in the shaping process is like continually growing and shaping our leaders to be better leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that concludes another episode of us telling the stories of our incredible staff and their work to support our powerful mission. Until next week, do wonders.